Hello, my name is Ian Burns, and welcome back to US History. Today I want to talk about freedom and the 21st century. Before we start, we need to discuss the US Constitution. In the United States, our Constitution explains what the president can and cannot do, how Congress, which is like the United States Parliament, makes new laws, and what to do if those new laws violate the laws of the Constitution itself. The Bill of Rights was then added to the end of the Constitution to secure the rights of the US citizens and protect them from tyranny. The Bill of Rights contains 10 amendments. Each amendment details a different set of rights all US citizens possess. Before we continue, let's talk about rights. In Europe, a right is a freedom given by a country's citizens by its government. In the United States, however, rights are a little bit different. In the United States, the Declaration of Independence specifies 3 inalienable rights. The key word there is inalienable. Inalienable means that they are granted not by government, but by God. Those rights are above government, and they cannot be justly taken away. Instead, it's government's primary job to protect those inalienable rights given by God. Those 3 rights are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Those are very abstract concepts, however, and the Bill of Rights tries to make them more specific so we can better understand them. Now I'm going to read the First Amendment. Congress shall make no law respecting the establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, or abridging the freedom of speech or of the press, or the right of the people to peacefully assemble and to petition the government for a redress of grievances. That gives us 4 main freedoms: the freedom of religion, the freedom of speech, the freedom of press or the media, and the freedom to peacefully assemble. In other words, to protest. Before we move on, we need to talk about human imperfection. We humans are imperfect creatures, and freedom, in its perfect form, only exists in our minds. Even the best of us are never perfectly moral and often make poor decisions. We smoke, we drink, we overeat, we don't brush our teeth before we go to sleep, we don't study enough, we're lazy, sometimes we get angry and resort to violence when we shouldn't. We're imperfect. All of us. And a government managed by imperfect people can only protect our rights imperfectly. And though the government is imperfect in protecting our rights to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, those rights remain inalienable. First, let's talk about the freedom of religion. The freedom of religion means that the government cannot tell its citizens which gods or gods to worship or how to worship them. You can be Buddhist, you can be Christian, Jewish, or any other of the world's religions, and the government cannot prohibit you from worshiping your god or gods however you want. In the United States, we take this freedom so seriously that we allow people to worship gods and religions ironically. 15,000 people officially worship the Force, the religion of Star Wars. And another group of atheists created a religion called the Church of the Flying Spaghetti Monster. Now, some people say that the freedom of religion is the most important freedom of all, and that it's absolutely necessary because God is above government. And without God, there can be no inalienable rights, and the government again has complete control over people's lives. Moreover, religion gives people common values. Traditional American values like hard work, independence, self-sufficiency, generosity have their roots in Christianity. As people become less religious, their values have changed. Nowadays, everybody has their own ideas about right and wrong. While this can lead to important discussions and positive change, Americans now sometimes have difficulties understanding one another. Many Europeans expect their governments to take care of them if they lose their jobs or if something tragic happens in their family. In the United States, this has traditionally been done by churches, who have supported their members in times of personal difficulty. For example, if someone loses his or her job, often the local church will support that person's family until he or she can find another one. Other members of the church might cook that family dinner or give their children Christmas gifts when parents cannot afford to. This year, however, even churches have been shut down due to fear of the spreading coronavirus. Reverend Jack Roberts in Kentucky decided not to cancel his church's Easter Mass. Instead, he asked churchgoers to stay in their cars while they attended the service outdoors. Despite all of the churchgoers remaining in their cars during the service, the police arrived and arrested Reverend Roberts for disobeying Kentucky law. When Reverend Roberts told the police that holding Mass was his First Amendment right, the police answered, "Your rights have been suspended." Now, that answer begs the question, if rights can be suspended, are they even rights at all? Next, I want to talk about the freedom of speech. The freedom of speech is the ability to say what you want and not be put in prison. There are, of course, limitations. I cannot threaten to kill someone or lie in a public advertisement. I cannot tell you that this staple remover cures cancer, because that would simply be a lie. However, I can criticize any political figure I want without fear of being put in jail, and generally, I can say anything I would like, no matter how painful it is for someone to hear. That brings up one of the problems with the freedom of speech. It isn't always nice. It allows people to say some pretty horrible things. But just because someone cannot be jailed for their speech doesn't mean everyone has to like it. Well, I can go and tell my fat neighbor that he looks like an enormous, ugly piece of human flesh. That doesn't mean I will be popular in my neighborhood. Many businesses, such as social media platforms and universities, have now tried to limit what is now called hate speech. These are private companies, they're not the government, and therefore they are not bound by the First Amendment. This began by disallowing racial slurs, such as the N-word and other discriminatory language from being used on their platforms and on campuses. Today, many believe that hate speech is just as bad as physical violence. Before we move on, I want to talk about something that happened in England just last year. This man is a British comedian who goes by the stage name Count Dankula. He made a YouTube video in which he taught his puppy to hail Hitler with the Nazi salute. The British government and the British police thought this was so terrible that Count Dankula was arrested and put in jail for an entire year. As a reaction, some people have started to ask the question, has hate speech gone too far? Some of the phrases banned by University of California, Berkeley include, "Where are you from?" "You're good at math," and "You're not good at math." Likewise, Twitter has banned dozens of users for what it considers improper usage of the word he and she. Similarly, Donald Trump was heavily criticized by the media for referring to COVID-19 as the China virus, in the same manner as the Spanish flu. Many saw his usage of the word the China virus as a racist insult. The third right guaranteed by the United States Constitution is the freedom of the press. Freedom of the press allows newspapers and media companies to publish articles without government constriction. It also prevents the government from giving money to newspapers, so they aren't incentivized to publish propaganda. Most Americans now get their news from the internet, which is highly unregulated. They no longer order newspapers, and few watch news on the TV. Therefore, newspapers and media companies have had to cut costs in order to survive. This makes it very difficult for newspapers to properly check their sources and write quality articles. Fake news became a hot topic in 2016 after the election of Donald Trump as President of the United States. The media reacted very strongly to Donald Trump's election. Some news companies, such as NBC, CNN, and MSNBC, have refused to publish any story that could make Donald Trump look good. It has been said that if Donald Trump came out in favor of oxygen, the New York Times would advise readers to stop breathing. Other networks, such as Fox, have come out in favor of the president. These networks rarely publish pieces that criticize the president, because all American news organizations have chosen one side or the other. Americans no longer know who to trust for their information. This has resulted in less than half the public trusting President Trump and the news media to provide reliable information about the coronavirus. As you can see, 53% of people don't trust Donald Trump to provide them accurate information, and 51% don't trust the news media. The last freedom provided by the First Amendment is the freedom to assemble, which allows people to gather together to protest. Typically, protests have led to positive social change, such as equality for Black Americans and equality for women. Unfortunately, fear of coronavirus has made protests a public danger. However, because the lockdown has left 20 million Americans out of work, protests have become increasingly important in order to guarantee economic stability for many Americans. Protests to end the lockdown have been breaking out all over the country. Unfortunately, these lockdowns increase the risk of coronavirus and could even make the lockdown last longer than it otherwise would. In the end, many are needing to choose between economic and social freedoms on the one hand, and safety on the other. We as Americans need to have an important conversation to decide which of those two important values we need to prioritize. Many believe the rights guaranteed by the First Amendment are too liberal. It allows people to worship religions that don't exist. It allows us to say things that are hurtful to others. It allows the news media to spread misinformation. And finally, it can endanger our health when we care more about freedom than we do about safety. I want to leave you with one last quote, however. Benjamin Franklin, one of the founding fathers of the United States, once said, "Those who would give up essential liberty to purchase a little temporary safety deserve neither liberty nor safety." And I think that's something very important we all need to consider. Thank you for joining me with American History. My name is Ian Burns. Have a good day.